War Stories, Guam Episode, Transcript. Guam is one of those places that feels like paradise the moment you step off the plane. White sand beaches, crystal clear blue water, palm trees swaying in the Pacific breeze. It's also one of the most strategically significant pieces of land in the Pacific Ocean. For centuries, Guam has passed between empires. Spain claimed it in the 1500s. The United States took control in 1898. And during World War II, the island became the site of brutal fighting and a harsh Japanese occupation that left scars still visible today, in the jungle, and in the stories passed down by the Chamorro people. If you spend enough time there, you start to notice something. The island feels layered. Not in a mystical sense, but simply in the way that history never truly disappears. I spent time on Guam during 2 separate deployments with the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit. Most of my memories involve long nights in the jungle, spiderwebs across my face, and wondering how something so beautiful could be so unforgiving after dark. And while I never personally witnessed anything unexplainable, there was one incident on that island that story has stayed with me ever since. But that's a different story. Because according to locals, and no small number of Marines and airmen who trained there, a lot of strange things happen on Guam, many of them seemingly tied to bloodshed. These are just a few true accounts from civilians and service members about the island's strangeness. My name is Luke Callahan, and this is War Stories. Story 1, The Legless Child. This first account was originally submitted to Nick Orton's Tales from the Grid Square Project. Of all the stories I've read, none are quite as unsettling as those involving children. Hollywood understands this. Films like The Exorcist, The Omen, The Ring, Children of the Corn. Fear of children runs against our primal instincts. We're wired to protect them, yet our gut tells us to run. A sailor who served at Naval Station Guam in 2007 as a security officer writes. This happened in 2007, about a year after I graduated and was posted to Naval Station Guam. Almost immediately after arriving in 2006 and getting to know the Chamorro people, they started telling me how haunted the island is. The longer I was there, the more I learned about the terrible things Japanese soldiers did to the Chamorro during the war. I'd always believed in spirits and the paranormal, but I'd never personally experienced anything another person could confirm. Many locals talked about seeing ghosts and about the legend of the Teodomona, ancestral spirits that the Chamorro both fear and deeply respect. When everyone around you is sharing their own unique paranormal experiences, it makes you almost wish you'd had one of your own. As a security officer working the night shift, part of our job was checking all the buildings to make sure they were locked and secured for the night. On this particular night, my partner and I had cleared most of the buildings and finally reached the Child Development Center. We checked the front doors, then walked around back to where the playground was. At first everything seemed normal. Then we reached the sandbox area, where there was one of those plastic turtle shells, you know the kind, where kids can crawl underneath and play. When I looked at the turtle shell, I saw what appeared to be a child staring out at us from underneath it. My first thought was, my God, this kid has been here for who knows how long and nobody noticed. But looking closer, I realized something was very, very wrong. The child had only a torso, no legs. The skin wasn't pale or white, but darker, like one of the local Chamorro people. I watched as it began to move out from under the shell. The movement was slow, almost like a glide, an army crawl, but smooth, not jerky. I backed up and glanced over at the sailor with me. My first instinct was that she'd think I was losing it. But when I looked at her face, it was completely white. It was obvious she was seeing the exact same thing. We didn't stick around. We bolted back to our vehicle, took one last look over our shoulders as we ran, but there was nothing there. As we drove away, I asked my partner what she'd seen, just to confirm it. I honestly thought I was being dramatic or that my eyes were playing tricks. But she described the exact same thing, the legless child crawling out from under the turtle shell. She said she felt something deeply evil about it. The next day, we were talking to some of the local base police officers we worked with. Apparently, this child had been seen by many others on multiple occasions. According to the officers, the area where the Child Development Center was built had once been a mass grave, a site where Japanese soldiers had murdered many Chamorro men, women, and children, whose bodies were dumped in a pit and buried without ceremony. Story 2, The Bunker at Pirates Cove. This next story was shared online by a woman under the handle Amberose33. She recalls a chilling experience during a family vacation to Guam when she was about 12. While her family stopped to eat at a popular roadside diner called Jake's Cove, she and her sister went exploring nearby and came across the remains of a World War II machine gun bunker, one that turned out not to be entirely empty. I had the chance to visit Guam 8 years ago. It was an incredible experience, and I'd love to go back someday. During our visit, we stopped at this roadside restaurant called Jake's Cove. While our parents sat down to enjoy their drinks, my sister and I wandered off until the food arrived. We made our way around the back of the building and a little ways beyond it, where we came across an old World War II bunker. It had a creepy feeling to it, and later when we talked about it, we both admitted we'd felt uneasy. But we checked it out anyway, and I snapped some photos on our digital camera. As we scrolled through the pictures to see how they turned out, one of them made me stop cold. It was a hot tropical day, but what I saw gave me goosebumps. The photo was of the bunker entrance, and peeking around the corner of the doorway, clear as day, was the face of a man. I was only about 12 at the time, so needless to say, that photo scared me half to death. My sister and I got out of there and ran back to our parents. We showed them the picture, and even they agreed it looked like someone was staring at us from inside the empty bunker. Thoroughly creeped out, I deleted the photo, and I thought that was the end of it. We returned to the hotel that evening and settled in for the night. But as I slept, I had this strange dream of a man in a brown uniform standing at the foot of my bed. Again, I was only 12, so this really shook me. I even remember begging my family to go back to the bunker the next morning so I could apologize to the spirit for taking photos or somehow disrespecting him. As someone who has always been skeptical of the supernatural, this was deeply disturbing. Even after all these years, trying to find a rational explanation, I have to believe it was a ghost. Story 3, Building 3169 and Korean Air Flight 801. While the most well-known tragedy in Guam's history involves the bloodshed of World War II, there is another lesser-known disaster that marked the island. On the night of August 6, 1997, Korean Air Flight 801, arriving from Seoul, South Korea, crashed into Nimitz Hill on final approach to Guam International Airport. There were 254 people on board, South Korean tourists, honeymooners, families, and church groups, as well as U.S. military personnel and their dependents. Poor weather reduced visibility to near zero, and pilot error combined with confusion about the landing guidance system brought the plane too low, too early. Only 26 survivors were pulled from the wreckage. The military, with its heavy presence on the island, was first to respond. Navy helicopters arrived first. Seabees from Naval Mobile Construction Battalion 133 cut a path through dense jungle with bulldozers. Navy SEALs helped cut through the wreckage. The Guam Army National Guard provided logistics and search and rescue support. The Air Force sent refueling vehicles for the helicopters. It was a remarkable joint effort. But once the final survivors were recovered, the somber work of identifying 228 dead and returning them to their families began. The Navy offered Building 3169 on base as a makeshift morgue. The bodies were held there for an extended period until all were claimed. Since then, strange things have reportedly been happening in and around that building. A Marine veteran writing under the handle Classic 0311 writes, "If there's one place on the island that's truly haunted, it has to be Building 3169 on Naval Station Guam. It's located at the Defense Logistics Agency Distribution Center and was used as the makeshift morgue during the Korean Air disaster in the late 90s. I'm not really someone who believes in ghosts and spirits. But whenever I was in or around that building, I could hear what sounded like people speaking Korean. It honestly freaked me out. I've heard children crying while walking through the halls, and at times I've heard what sounds like people asking for help in broken English with a very distinct Korean accent. We once had a South Korean Navy ship docked at the pier directly across from the building. None of those sailors knew anything about the building or what it had once been used for. One morning, I noticed a group of them just standing there, staring and pointing up at it. I asked if something was wrong. One of them said they were hearing people inside the building calling out for help, in Korean. That made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and it still does thinking about it today. I don't understand any of this and I have no idea how to explain it. Like I said, I still don't really believe in this kind of thing. But in my experience, if there is somewhere that's haunted, nothing fits the definition like Building 3169. Story 4, The Ouija Board and Dave. This next account, first shared with the Tales from the Grid Square Project, is an unsettling story of what can happen when curiosity gets the better of judgment. This began during my first few months stationed on Guam. I was in a platoon with a guy I'd served with in Bahrain who was really into all things paranormal. One day he brought up the idea of using a Ouija board with me and two other guys, one a sailor from our command, the other a base security officer. According to him, it worked best with 4 people, 3 on the board and 1 to transcribe. We were unsure at first, but he'd had supposedly cool experiences with it at a previous posting in Kings Bay, Georgia, vague messages about an upcoming holy war, that kind of thing. Curiosity got the better of us. The first night was underwhelming. A few small movements, nothing more. But after a few sessions, we started getting real responses. The planchette would sit still for long stretches, then begin to move. One night, after asking the usual questions, it spelled out the name and rank of a sailor who claimed he'd died on Guam during World War II. His first name was John, and he was an E5. We Googled it, and sure enough, a sailor matching that name and rank was listed as Kia during the Battle of Guam in 1944. We were all pretty shaken. After that, things got darker. The planchette started spinning on its own, spelling out the names of demons. That was enough for me. I've never touched a Ouija board since. About a year later, my buddy organized another session with 8 or 9 of us. I was an observer, I wanted no part of it. 3 sailors got on the board. Nothing happened at first, so they closed the session and let others try. The planchette started moving for the new group. Then, suddenly, a guy sitting in a chair against the wall, I'll call him Davis, started laughing. A low, creepy laugh. We thought he was joking. But he kept going. He slumped forward, shoulders heaving, and started talking about how he was the Lord of the Flies and how he was going to kill us. This went on for several minutes before he passed out and slid off the chair onto the floor. He was barely breathing for what felt like a solid 5 minutes. We tried everything, slapping him, sternum rubs, nothing worked. Then Davis just sat up, leaned back against the chair, and lit a cigarette like nothing had happened. He looked around at all of us and asked why he was on the floor. He thought he'd just had too much to drink. Everyone else was borderline hyperventilating. One guy had tucked himself into a corner and was barely holding it together. Later that night, Davis stepped out onto the second-story balcony for a smoke with another guy. A friend of mine, I'll call him Will, was watching from inside. Davis turned, stared at Will with this distant, blank expression, and asked him to come out onto the balcony. Will got an overwhelming bad feeling and said no. Davis nodded and said, almost calmly, good. Because I just got the urge to throw you off. Then, like a switch flipped, Davis snapped back to normal and kept smoking as if nothing had happened. A few weeks later, Davis and I were hanging out at a buddy's off-base apartment. 2 stories, bedroom upstairs, gear storage in the other room. Despite having an upstairs bed, the guy always slept on the couch and wouldn't go up unless he had to. I asked why. He just looked at me and said, "The place is haunted, man." I called it. But then a door slammed shut upstairs, hard, and there were only 3 of us in the building. It happened again before the night was over. Davis was my ride home, and we'd all been drinking, so we crashed there. Davis and I ended up sharing the upstairs bed.